over at what indirect taxes are. Indirect taxes are the taxes levied on the consumption of goods and services. It is not directly levied on the income of a person. Instead, he or she has to pay the tax along with the price of goods or services bought by the seller, which means that when a person or a customer or buyer is buying a product or good, they have to pay a certain amount or certain percentage of tax or VAT, which is included in the goods. Most of the time, people don't know that taxes are included in the price of the goods, which is also why it's called indirect taxes.
Now that you know what indirect tax is, let's take a look at some examples of indirect taxes. Right now, I will be covering 3 examples. So first, we'll take a look at VAT, aka Value Added Tax. Value Added Tax is a tax charged on goods and services, and it will be levied at each stage of the supply chain, meaning that every time a consumer, not the final consumer, buys something from the provider, this VAT will be added to that too, meaning like there's a bread making factory, and then a bakery is gonna buy from that bread making factory. The bakery will need to pay the tax of VAT. So basically, if the bread is 100 baht and the VAT is 7%, they'll need to pay 100, and that 7% goes to the government. And then when the final consumers, like us, going to buy the bread snack, then they will need to also pay the VAT of 7%, meaning if they put the bread at 300 baht, then we'll need to pay the amount of that 7%. Now let's look at sales tax. Now sales tax is a tax that is only levied on the last stage, aka on the final consumer, meaning that like us, if we're gonna go to the bakery to buy the snack and the sales tax is 20%, then we gotta pay that since we're the final consumer. But the bakery who buys the bread from the factory does not need to pay because it's only on the final consumers. Now let's take a look at the last example of this tax. Service tax. Now service tax is a tax that is applied on services like restaurants, travel agents, cabs, taxis, those services. So it will be taxable on them by buying food for restaurants, buying food to cook them and sell them to the final consumers. They will be taxed, and then we will also be taxed with service tax. And that is the examples of service tax.
So that now we know the meaning of indirect tax and example of indirect tax, we'll be learning about percentage of VAT included. Now, VAT is just the value added tax. Now, the value added tax is rate 7% for most of sales of good, provision of service, and import. Now, that means that the price of good is 93% and VAT is 7%. Now, we're going to have a checklist on what we have learned so far. So we have learned about what is the meaning of indirect tax. We also have learned example of indirect tax, and we have learned percentage of VAT included. Now, the last thing that we will be learning is how does indirect taxes influence supply curve. So this is how. An indirect tax will lead to a rise in the cost of production. When this happens, firm will increase price by the amount of the tax at each quantity supplied to maintain profitability. So that means, in another word, is they will decrease quantity supplied at each price, which will lead to a decrease in supply. That means if the tax rises, there will be a decrease in the supply so that they can make more profit. And this is it for us. Thank you for listening and goodbye. Hope you enjoyed the video and thank you.